Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into what I like to call a real-life detective story. But, the culprit we're tracking down isn't some master thief or an international spy. No, we're actually looking for an invisible, slightly mischievous saboteur living right inside our own brains. It's this quiet psychological force that shapes literally every decision you make, every argument you have, and every single opinion you hold. We're talking, of course, about confirmation bias. So let's get right into it and unmask the saboteur. To really get how this works, let's play a quick game. This is actually based on a famous 1960 experiment by psychologist Peter Wasson. Okay, here's the sequence. 2, 4, 6. Your job? Guess the rule that generates those numbers. Now, if you're like pretty much everyone else who takes this test, your brain probably jumped straight to the rule, numbers increasing by 2. And to test that, you'd probably suggest 8, 10, and 12. And I would tell you, yep, those fit the rule perfectly. So you'd be feeling pretty confident right about now, right? But here is the twist. The actual rule is simply any 3 increasing numbers. That's the whole thing. 1, 2, 3 would work. So would 5, 20, and 100. The crazy thing is, most people completely fail this puzzle because they only test sequences that confirm their initial guess. They never bother to test sequences that could actually disprove it, like 3, 2, 1. They aren't really looking for the truth. They're just looking to prove themselves right. So what's going on here? Well, this phenomenon is known as confirmation bias. It's the brain's tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and remember information that confirms what we already believe, while totally ignoring or dismissing anything that contradicts it. Now take a deep breath, because I really want to be clear about this. This is not a character flaw. It's definitely not a sign of low intelligence. This is a fundamental, hardwired feature of human cognition. It's literally running in the background of every single human brain. See, we all love to think of our brains as perfect, objective, truth-seeking machines. But the reality? Your brain is actually a coherence-seeking machine. It prioritizes consistency over accuracy, familiarity over evidence, and comfort over truth. It doesn't make you irrational, it just makes you human. But honestly, understanding this is the absolute key to not being controlled by it. All right, let's dive into Section 1, the Saboteur's Playbook, and the 4 ways it actually hijacks your thinking. So confirmation bias doesn't just work in one single way. There are actually 4 distinct kind of sneaky mechanisms it uses. Number 1 is biased search. When we have a question, we instinctively search for evidence that supports what we already think. If you think a new diet is great, you Google its benefits, right? Not its risks. You aren't looking for truth, you're looking for ammunition. And as you can imagine, in our age of algorithms, this is amplified exponentially. Social media feeds and search engines just give you more of what you already click on, which traps you in this massive echo chamber of your own making. Now, even if we somehow get past that initial search, we hit mechanism number 2, biased interpretation. There was this fascinating study back in 1979 that gathered people who were for and against capital punishment. They gave them the exact same mixed evidence on whether the death penalty deters crime. The result? Both groups walked away even more convinced of their original opposing positions. They looked at the exact same data, but the proponents focused on the supporting evidence, and the opponents focused entirely on the flaws. Interpretation is an active construction, and it's built entirely using your existing beliefs. Okay, moving on to the 3rd trick, biased memory. Here's the thing. Your memory isn't a video recording. It's really more of a biased reconstruction. This is exactly why you perfectly remember that one time your daily horoscope was startlingly accurate, but you completely forget the hundreds of times it was absolute nonsense. Over time, your memory becomes this highly selective archive. It preserves all the hits that support your worldview and quietly takes the misses and just tosses them in the trash. And finally, mechanism 4, biased scrutiny. This one's pretty funny when you think about it. When we see evidence that supports us, we give it a quick, easy nod. Yep, that makes total sense. But when we see evidence that challenges us, oh boy, suddenly we turn into forensic auditors. Wait, who funded this? What was the sample size? Was this even peer-reviewed? We apply these totally asymmetric standards, letting weak confirming evidence breeze right through while holding strong disconfirming evidence to a nearly impossible standard. Which brings us to Section 2, the crime scenes and the real-world damage. Because listen, this isn't just some quirky laboratory phenomenon. This bias causes serious, high-stakes damage out in the real world. Let's look at medicine. When a doctor forms an initial diagnosis, they naturally tend to order tests that confirm it, rather than testing for alternative explanations. In the medical world, this is called premature closure, and it contributes to an estimated 15% of diagnostic errors. A doctor might see a healthy-looking young patient with chest pain and just assume it's acid reflux, completely missing a fatal heart attack. The doctor isn't being negligent, they're just human, and the bias made their first answer feel like the only answer. And honestly, we see this absolutely everywhere. In relationships, if you've decided your partner's careless, you are going to notice every single time they're late, but totally ignore 100 small acts of care, basically turning your relationship into a biased courtroom. Over in politics, people consume news for validation, not information. That creates these separate evidentiary universes where two sides can look at the exact same event and draw completely opposite facts. And in business, stubborn entrepreneurs will routinely ignore glaring market research warning them that their product won't sell, right up until the very day the business goes under. All right, here's where things get wild. Section 3, the twist, the backfire effect. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, well, hey, if people are biased, let's just give them the facts, right? But here is the terrifying reality. Correcting misinformation often makes it stronger. I know, it's completely counterintuitive, but when people are presented with clear, factual evidence that contradicts a deeply held belief, they don't just naturally update their belief, they double down. The brain actually treats contradictory facts like a physical attack. So instead of surrendering, it builds thicker walls to defend its position, emerging with even more emotional commitment to that original belief. This leads to a really interesting phenomenon known as the fortress under siege. See, the backfire effect is absolutely at its strongest when a belief is tied to our identity, our emotions, or our sense of social belonging. Whether we're talking about deep-seated political rumors or something like the anti-vaccine movement, when you present opposing data, people do not change their minds. They actually remember their original belief more vividly. The very attempt to break through the bias strengthens it. Arguing against someone's identity is literally like attacking a fortress. The gates just lock that much tighter. So how do we handle this? Let's get into Section 4, the defense, and equipping yourself to fight back. Don't worry, we are definitely not leaving you defenseless here. You can't surgically remove confirmation bias from your brain. It's part of your cognitive architecture. But we can absolutely build habits to bypass it. We've got 3 actionable, science-backed steps for you. Seek disconfirmation, separate observation from interpretation, and create accountability. Let's break these down one by one. All right, technique 1 is to actively seek disconfirmation. What this means is deliberately searching for the absolute strongest argument against your position. If you're investing, force yourself to read the bear case first. If you're in a conflict, try articulating your opponent's argument so perfectly that they actually say, yes, that's exactly what I mean. Is it mentally uncomfortable? Absolutely. Your brain is going to hate it. But that discomfort is basically the price of accuracy. Moving to technique 2. This requires you to separate raw data from the crazy stories your brain makes up. For example, my colleague didn't reply to my email. Okay, that is a neutral observation. But my colleague is ignoring me because they don't respect me. Well, that's an interpretation, and it is heavily loaded with your own emotional biases. When you catch yourself jumping to a story like that, force yourself to generate 3 alternative explanations. Maybe they're just slammed with work, or maybe they just missed the email entirely. And finally, technique 3, build external accountability structures. Look, willpower alone is simply not going to cut it. You have to rely on external systems. If you're on a team, appoint a designated dissenter whose sole job is to challenge the group's view. In your personal life, find a brutally honest friend and give them explicit permission to tell you what you need to hear, not just what you want to hear. Make your biases visible to someone who doesn't actually share them. As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to remember this one thing. The most dangerous moment in any decision isn't when you're unsure. It's actually when you are absolutely sure. So before you make your next big leap, or form a firm opinion, or even send that angry text, ask yourself this simple but incredibly powerful question. How could I be wrong? It just might save you from your own invisible saboteur. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer. And remember, keep questioning everything.